31 years old, and I have never told anyone the full story of what happened the night I met my boyfriend's family. Not my best friend. Not my therapist. Not even my mom, who still asks me sometimes why I ended things with that nice-sounding man. I've kept it folded up inside me like a letter I wasn't sure I should have opened. But I think it's time. I should tell you something about myself first, because it matters for everything that comes after. I'm a software engineer. I've been one since I was 24, when I graduated early and landed a job at a mid-sized fintech company in Austin. I'm good at it. Really good. By the time the events of this story took place, I was clearing just over $41,000 a month. Not because I got lucky. Because I worked nights and weekends for 6 years straight, turned down promotions that would have moved me into management and away from the technical work I actually loved, and built a skill set that not many people have. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I drive a 2016 Honda Civic that I've had since grad school. I buy my groceries at the regular store, not the fancy one. I wear jeans and plain sweaters. I have exactly one piece of jewelry, a small gold necklace my grandmother gave me before she passed, and I almost never wear it. I made a choice years ago to live small, not because I couldn't afford anything else, but because I watched what happened to people when money became visible. I watched colleagues buy things to announce themselves. I watched friendships shift. I watched a girl I knew in college marry someone who wanted her income more than he wanted her. I decided, quietly and permanently, that the people in my life would know me before they knew my bank account. So when I started dating my boyfriend, I'll call him Liam, I kept it that way. He thought I was doing fine, comfortable maybe. He knew I worked in tech. He just didn't know the specifics, and I didn't volunteer them. Liam was kind, genuinely kind, in the way that made me lower my guard faster than I should have. He brought me coffee when I was stressed. He remembered small things I said in passing. He was a landscape architect, made a decent living, seemed completely unbothered by the fact that I always insisted on splitting bills. We'd been together for 8 months when he first mentioned his family. His parents lived about 2 hours outside Austin, in a town I'd never had reason to visit. His father had built a commercial real estate development company from the ground up. Nothing flashy, but solid. The kind of company that had its name on buildings that had been standing for 30 years. His mother came from old Texas money, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that just quietly shapes the world around it. Liam had grown up in a nice house, gone to a good school, had the easy confidence of someone who never worried about the basics. He invited me to Sunday dinner. Just dinner, meet the family, see the house, have some food. He was nervous in a way that I found sweet, smoothing his hair in the car, checking twice that he had the wine he'd brought as a hostess gift. I wore what I would normally wear: dark jeans, a simple navy blouse, clean white sneakers, nothing remarkable. I'd thought about dressing up and then I decided not to. I had a reason for that, because something had happened the week before the dinner that I hadn't told Liam about. A colleague of mine, someone who worked in a completely different department, had mentioned offhandedly that she'd gone to college with a girl named Ashton Calloway, and that Ashton Calloway was apparently very much in the picture with the Calloway family's eldest son, who was a landscape architect in Austin, who was, her words, basically expected to come back around to her eventually. I didn't react. I nodded and let the conversation move on. But I sat with it for days. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe nothing. Maybe Ashton was an old girlfriend and my colleague had outdated information. Maybe it was exactly what it sounded like. I didn't want to ask Liam directly because I didn't have enough to go on, and I didn't want to seem paranoid. But I decided on the drive out to meet his family that I was going to watch. Really watch. I was going to show up exactly as they expected me to show up, quiet, unremarkable, easily dismissed, and I was going to pay attention to everything. The house was beautiful in the way that old Texas homes are beautiful. Big, wide porch, pecans in the yard. His mother met us at the door. She was tall and thin with silver hair she wore pinned back, and she smiled at me in a way that landed somewhere just short of warmth. The kind of smile that says I'm being polite because I was raised to be polite. She shook my hand. Liam's told us about you, she said. Not wonderful things, just about you. His father came in from the back, hand extended, more genuinely friendly. Good to meet you, sweetheart. Come on in. His father I liked immediately and completely. There was a sister, a younger one, 26, home from graduate school in Dallas. She had Liam's coloring, but her mother's precise manner. She looked at my sneakers for just a half second too long. We sat in the living room before dinner. I let Liam carry the conversation. I asked questions about the real estate business, about the sister's graduate program, about the town. I was pleasant. I was interested. I was, in every visible way, exactly the kind of girlfriend you bring home and don't worry about, and I kept watching. His mother asked me, with careful politeness, what I did. I told her I worked in software. Oh, like IT, she said. I said, sure, something like that. She moved on quickly to ask about my family, where I grew up, what my parents did. I answered honestly. I'm from a small town in Ohio. My dad was a high school teacher. My mom worked at a dental office. I watched something in her expression settle, like a decision being confirmed. At dinner, his father asked thoughtful questions. His mother talked at length about a charity gala they were co-hosting next spring, name-dropping the families who'd be attending in a way that felt less like conversation and more like inventory. The sister mentioned, twice, a trip she'd taken to Italy the previous summer. I nodded. I ate my food. I smiled. And then his mother left the table to take a phone call, and the sister followed her a few minutes later, and his father excused himself to check something in the study, and Liam got up to use the bathroom. I was alone in the dining room for about 4 minutes. Their house had a kind of open layout, where the dining room flowed into a hallway that connected to a small sitting room near the kitchen. I wasn't trying to overhear anything. I was sitting at the table, not moving, with my glass of water. But the house was quiet, and their voices carried. I heard his mother, low and precise. She's sweet enough, I'm sure. But this is not the right fit for him long term. You know that. I heard the sister say something I couldn't fully make out. Then his mother again. Ashton's family is flying in for the gala. She's going to be there. And Liam knows it. He knows what this family needs right now. Then the sister, does he even know about the Lawson deal? His mother, he'll know what he needs to know when the time is right. The point is, this one isn't going anywhere. She's a placeholder. Placeholder. She said it lightly, the way you'd say a placeholder in a spreadsheet, a temporary thing, a blank to be filled in later with something that actually counts. I sat very still. Liam came back a minute later and sat down and refilled my water without being asked. He was telling me something about his father's favorite fishing spot on the lake. I smiled and asked a follow-up question and let him talk. Inside, I was doing math. The Larson deal? I knew that name. There was a Larson group in Austin, commercial real estate. Big enough that they showed up sometimes in the business news I skimmed over morning coffee. I knew, in a general way, that they had ties to a family in Houston, a family whose daughter had gone to SMU, who had done some kind of internship in Dallas. I didn't know anything for certain. But the shape of it was coming clear. I stayed through dessert. I helped clear the plates without being asked. I hugged his father goodnight and thanked his mother for having me, and I watched her smile that precise smile again and say, "Of course, dear." In the car, Liam asked how I thought it went. I said his dad was wonderful, that his mom seemed like a lot of work. He laughed, a little tightly. I said I meant it affectionately. He reached over and held my hand on the drive back. I did not break up with him that night. I know that's the thing people expect me to say. I found out, I walked away. But I didn't, and I want to explain why, because if you skip this part, the end doesn't make sense. I'd grown up watching my mother be dismissed. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just quietly, consistently moved to the edges of rooms by people who decided she wasn't worth the full version of their attention. She was a dental office receptionist from a small town. She was sweet and funny, and the most competent person I have ever known, and she was invisible to entire categories of people for reasons that had nothing to do with who she actually was. I had promised myself a long time ago that I would never let anyone make me invisible, not because I needed them to know how much I made, but because I needed to know, really know, with receipts, exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. So I stayed, not out of hope that it would be different, out of a decision to see it all the way through. Over the next 3 weeks, I did some quiet research. The Larson Group acquisition was real. They were in talks to merge with Callaway Development. I found it buried in a trade publication. The Lawson family had a daughter named Ashton, 28, who had grown up with Liam, who had been photographed at 3 Callaway family events in the last 2 years. She was in the background of a LinkedIn photo I found of his mother at a charity luncheon. And then I did something I hadn't planned on doing, but that felt necessary. I called my company's VP of Strategic Partnerships, a woman named Victoria, who I'd worked closely with for 2 years, and told her we might have a conflict of interest issue to review regarding a vendor we'd been evaluating. Here's the part I hadn't told you yet. The Lawson Group, through a subsidiary, had submitted a proposal to lease office space to my company for our new Austin expansion. My company was one of their biggest prospective commercial tenants. My company, where I was a senior engineer with enough internal standing that my department head had CC'd me on the preliminary evaluation. I was, in the most indirect and technical way imaginable, part of the team that would be recommending whether or not we move forward with a Larson property. I didn't do anything with that information. I flagged a potential conflict to Victoria per protocol and recused myself from that specific evaluation. That was the right thing to do, and I did it without hesitation. But I knew the shape of what had been happening and why. The Callaway family wasn't just hoping Liam would choose Ashton eventually. They were actively managing the situation, keeping a placeholder warm while the business deal came together, planning for a moment when they would present the two of them in the same room at the right event and let the social gravity do the rest. I was the placeholder. I was the warm body standing in a gap so that Liam didn't do something inconvenient, like actually fall in love with someone else before the timing was right. What I still don't know, is whether Liam was aware of it. I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. I don't think he knew all of it. I think he knew more than I gave him credit for and less than his mother assumed. I think he genuinely liked me. I think he was also, in some deep and settled way, his mother's son. His parents were hosting a dinner for their business partners at the end of the month. Liam asked me to come. A real event hosted at their house with people from both the Callaway and Larson organizations. It was, in the language of everything I now understood, the moment where I would be on display as the casual girlfriend and Ashton Larson would be on display as the inevitable future. I said yes, and I dressed differently this time. Not loudly. Not in a way that announced anything, but I wore the charcoal silk blouse I'd bought in New York for a product launch 2 years ago. My good black trousers, the small gold necklace. I had my hair done in the afternoon. Not elaborate, just clean and finished in a way that reads a certain way to people who pay attention to such things. I drove my Civic. I arrived at the same time as a black Mercedes that parked ahead of me in the circular driveway. A woman stepped out in a white sheath dress, young, polished, the kind of pretty that comes from both good genetics and considerable maintenance. She glanced at my car. She glanced at me. She smiled with her mouth. She was Ashton. I didn't need an introduction. Inside, the evening had that particular energy of an event that is pretending to be casual. Caterers. A bar. People clustered in configurations that looked spontaneous but weren't. His mother was working the room in a soft blue wrap dress, and when she saw me come in, she crossed to me with that smile. There it was again, and said, "So glad you could make it," and steered me toward the drink table and left me there. I got a club soda. I found Liam's father, who was genuinely happy to see me, and introduced me to 3 people in the space of 5 minutes, like I was someone worth knowing. I liked him more than ever. I did not find Liam immediately because Liam was across the room, and Ashton was standing next to him, and his mother was standing with them, and from the body language it was clear that this triangle had arranged itself with intention. I watched it for a moment. Liam's back was slightly toward me. Ashton was laughing at something. His mother's hand was on Ashton's arm in a way that it had never been on mine. I walked over. "Hey," Liam said, and the way he said it, just slightly too quickly, just slightly too carefully, told me something. He introduced me. Ashton was warm in the way his mother was warm, technically flawless, landing just short of actual temperature. She said, "Liam's told me about you." And again, not wonderful things, just about you. and I understood that the phrase ran in the family. We talked for a few minutes. Ashton mentioned the gala. She mentioned that her family was so looking forward to deepening their relationship with the Callaways. She used the word relationship to mean the business deal, and I don't think she meant for it to land the way it did. And then the senior partner from the Larson Group joined us. A broad man in his 60s with the handshake of someone who closed deals for a living. He shook Liam's hand. He kissed Ashton's cheek. He turned to me and extended his hand and said, "And who do you work for?" I told him my company's name. He paused. His expression did something small and complicated. "You're with Meridian Tech?" I said yes. He looked at me differently than he had the second before. I didn't offer anything else. I didn't need to. The name of my company in that room, at that table, had its own weight. Liam's mother appeared at my elbow approximately 45 seconds later, which told me that this kind of room has its own intelligence system. She said with a smile that had gained a new dimension, "I didn't realize you were at Meridian. What department?" "Engineering," I told her. "Senior level, mostly infrastructure and systems." I mentioned, casually, that we had a big expansion coming, that we'd been evaluating commercial real estate options in the Austin area, that we were hoping to find the right long-term partner. I watched her process this. She said how wonderful with a warmth that had not been present at our first meeting. I said it was lovely to see everyone, and I set down my club soda, and I went to find Liam's father, and I said goodbye to him genuinely, because he was a good man who had always been kind to me, and that wasn't nothing. Then I found Liam. He was alone for a moment, near the windows. He looked at me with an expression that I couldn't fully read, something between uncertainty and an apology he hadn't figured out how to make yet. I said, "You're a good man in a lot of ways, Liam. I mean that." He started to say something. I put my hand briefly on his arm, the way you do when you're telling someone that what comes next isn't up for negotiation. I said, "I don't think this is the right fit. I think you know that too." He didn't argue. That told me everything. I drove home in my Civic with the windows down and the radio on, the Austin night coming through warm and soft. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. Not because I'm tough, but because somewhere in those 3 weeks I had finished grieving what this might have been, and what was left was just clarity. The following week, I got a call from a woman in the Larson Group's business development office. She wanted to set up a meeting, she said, to discuss how their properties might suit Meridian's expansion needs. She mentioned that they had a property in the North Austin corridor that she thought we'd find very competitive. I thanked her and forwarded the message to Victoria, as I was supposed to, since I had already recused myself from that process. I don't know how the deal turned out. That's not the part of the story that matters to me. What matters to me is this. The night his mother called me a placeholder, she was describing what she assumed I was. A gap. A blank. Temporary by definition. She didn't know that the blank was making $41,000 a month and had worked with half the business contacts in that room through professional channels she didn't know to ask about. She made that assumption because of my car and my sneakers, and the fact that I answered her questions simply and didn't perform for her. She wasn't wrong that I was quiet. She was wrong about what the quiet meant. My grandmother used to tell me, this woman who raised 3 kids on a teacher's salary and read more books than anyone I've ever known, she used to say that the most powerful thing you can be in a room full of people who've already decided what you are is exactly yourself. Not the version they expect, not a corrected version. Just yourself fully, without apology. I think about that a lot. I think about the way his mother's smile changed when she heard the name of my company. I'm not going to pretend that didn't feel like something, because it did. But what I carry forward isn't the look on her face when she recalculated. What I carry forward is that I'd never changed who I was for a single second of that whole experience. I showed up exactly as I was, every time. I drove my own car. I wore my own clothes. I asked real questions and gave real answers and let people see exactly as much of me as they were prepared to see. And when I left that night, I left with everything that was mine. I keep coming back to the word his mother used, placeholder. She said it so easily, like I was a cell in a spreadsheet waiting to be overwritten. And here's the thing, she wasn't entirely wrong about the situation. She just had no idea who was standing in her dining room when she said it. That's the part that stays with me. Not the anger, which faded faster than I expected. Not the sting of watching Liam introduce me to Ashton with that careful, rehearsed calm. What stays with me is how completely they had already written the ending before I'd even walked through the door. They looked at my car, my sneakers, and my simple answers, and they decided in under an hour that they knew everything about me that mattered. The consequences of that assumption were theirs to carry, not mine. I didn't set a trap. I didn't engineer a dramatic moment. I just refused to correct them. And the truth has a way of arriving on its own schedule, in its own form, without needing your help to do damage. My grandmother taught me something I didn't fully understand until that night. She said that how you treat people you think can't help you says more about your character than anything else you will ever do in your life. She wasn't quoting anyone. She just knew it the way people who have lived long enough and watched carefully enough come to know things. She lived by it so consistently that it became the standard I measured everything against, including myself. What I did in that situation: staying quiet, watching, taking my time before I acted. That wasn't passivity. It took more discipline than anything louder would have. It would have been easy to correct his mother the first night. To say, actually, I make more in a month than some people make in a year. To watch her recalibrate in real time. That satisfaction would have been immediate and completely hollow. Because then I would have been performing for her, letting her terms define my response. And I wasn't willing to do that. The intelligence I brought to those 3 weeks, the research, the patient observation, the understanding of how the business deal connected to everything they were doing. That wasn't cold calculation. It was just not being willing to be fooled. There's a difference between paranoia and paying attention. I paid attention. I followed what I saw to its logical conclusion. And when I understood the shape of it, I made choices that were right, not just for me, but by any reasonable standard. Flagging the conflict of interest to Victoria, recusing myself from the evaluation. I didn't do that for optics. I did it because it was correct. And the thing I'm most proud of, looking back, is that I left with my integrity intact. I didn't blow anything up. I didn't humiliate anyone. I just told Liam the truth, that it wasn't the right fit, and I drove home with my windows down. His mother's smile changed when she heard the name of my company. I noticed it, and I'll be honest, it felt like something. But that's not the moment I want to define what the whole experience meant. The moment I want to carry forward is the first dinner. Sitting at their table in my regular clothes, answering their questions simply and honestly, not performing, not shrinking, not adjusting who I was by a single degree to make them more comfortable. That's the thing my grandmother was really talking about. Not wealth, not status, not whether you can walk into a room and make people recalculate you. She was talking about whether you know who you are when nobody in the room is impressed, whether you can sit in that chair, be completely yourself, and not need anything from anyone there. I wasn't a placeholder. I was exactly who I was the whole time. That's the only thing worth being,